So, Sky and Trevor, if you could give a little bit of your background. Trevor Hare is WMG's restoration director, and Sky Jacobs is our IT and administrator. So don't be confused by his title. He will, even though he does administration work for us, he is very experienced out in the backcountry of southern Arizona. He's done that. He'll probably get into that a little bit more, but he has a lot of hidden talents in that way. And I'll be sharing a little bit as well, but I don't have near the experience that those two have. So looking forward to all that they have to share. Sky, do you want to tell a little bit about your background?
Sure. I've been go ahead, Trevor. What?
No, go ahead, Sky. You're good.
Oh, I've lived in southern Arizona for basically most of my life since I was a child, so I've gotten to know the topography and the landscape fairly well. I do as much traveling as I can, although I have a child now, so it's a little bit less than it was, but I've gotten to see most of southern Arizona and nearby northern Sonora. So yeah, I do have pretty good wide-ranging experience and knowledge about the region, so certainly ask questions about any specific places you're interested in, and I might be able to give you some info. Yeah.
Can you just give a little bit of background on the field work you've done in southern Arizona?
Yeah, I worked a lot with certain wildlife and on border issues. The cactus region's pygmy owls took me to the western part of Arizona and Sonora extensively. And then I've done a lot of kind of just more generalized research in Sonora, in the mountains of northeastern Sonora, the Sky Islands, and to some degree a lot of volunteer and other work in the Sky Islands of southeastern Arizona. And I worked with Trevor actually for many years with Sky Island Alliance, which we did extensive volunteer events in the Sky Islands as well.
Great.
Trevor?
So, like Lisa said, I'm Trevor Hare. I'm the restoration director here at Watershed Management Group. I first visited Tucson in March of 1983 on spring break from Colorado Mountain College. I grew up in the mountains of Colorado, camping, hunting, fishing, hiking. But when we rolled through Tucson on our way to the Seri Coast and Oregon Pipe and then the Seri Coast for spring break, I was just amazed by the mountains and the desert. And so in August, I stepped off of the plane down onto this is when you had to walk down the ramp to the tarmac at Tucson International. August, I got out of the plane and I almost just turned around and got back on because it was like 110 degrees out. I wasn't prepared at all, but I toughed it out. Was at school in the ecology department, started hanging out with the wildlife guys. I knew I made a mistake that I had gone into Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology because they were all desk biologists. So I started hanging out over in Bio East with all the wildlife biologists, fell in with the herpetologists, and started working for some of the graduate students in the western deserts. And then out of school, I took a job with Sky Island Alliance. My family and I often would travel around exploring areas. But at Sky Island Alliance, I was hired to run the volunteer program. So basically for 12 years, every other weekend, I took volunteers out all over the Sky Island region of southeastern Arizona, southwestern New Mexico, and northern Sonora, doing wilderness boundary surveys, road surveys, endangered species surveys, invasive species surveys. So I've visited many, many, many places out there. So I am often regaling staff here at WMG with field stories, great places to go see and visit. And so when Lisa asked Sky, and Sky was right there with me, when she asked Sky and I to share this with you, we jumped at the chance. So we're very excited.
Thanks, Trevor. Yes, and I've been spoiled to be on staff with both of them because when we do our annual staff retreat, they get to plan it all out, and we've gone to a lot of cool places together. So I'm Lisa Shipek, Executive Director, and I also want to introduce Lauren Monheim. Lauren, can you say hello real quick?
Hi everyone, like Lisa said, my name is Lauren and I am the River Run Network Program Coordinator here. I'm doing all of the background work for this event today. So Lisa and I will be watching the chat feature and we'll be shooting out some poll questions for you all later as well.
Yes, speaking of poll questions, if you could put up that first one. We've got a good audience here already, so we just want to get a sense of your involvement with the River Run Network, and then also, I think we have 3 questions for you here in this poll. How do you normally get out to connect with nature? And then how familiar are you with the mountains and watersheds of Southern Arizona? So that will give us a better sense of our audience. I know there are a lot of other ways to connect with nature than we mentioned there, but those are the principal things we'll be talking about today. So we're very happy to offer this event through the River Run Network as the start of our Steward in Place Summer Series. And we know that many of us have probably had vacation plans for the summer that were canceled or totally fell off our radar. I know that happened to me and a lot of people I've spoken with. And so we wanted to offer some resources for the community to get out and still enjoy our summer in Southern Arizona. There are many, many places to still go to that aren't 110 degrees in the middle of the day. And really a lot of unknown and not very highly trafficked places. So I think in Tucson, we're very fortunate to have all this wild area around us to go out and explore that is not on the radar, even regionally, I think. So feel free to put questions that you have in the chat box. We will ask everyone to mute now for the rest of this until probably the very end. We'll just have our speakers and myself be unmuted. So we have good sound quality. So let's see, we have 23 of 28 filled that out. If a few more could fill it out, then we'll show the results of this poll so we can see. We'll give another 30 seconds. And we will be we'll be starting with looking at a map of Southern Arizona and looking at the major mountain ranges and watersheds. And we'll be talking about the best places to go in the summer. We're not going to be talking about the lowlands area as much. And then getting into some practices for responsible stewardship in our watershed so that as we're getting out into these places, we are protecting the water quality, ensuring that we are having a reciprocal relationship with nature and not abusing it, but giving back to nature as well. So lots of good things we'll be covering today. And feel free to take notes, but we will be doing a follow-up email with some of the major points that we're covering. So if we could show the poll results. Thank you. So it looks like we've got some people who've been with the River Run Network for a while, and then we have quite a few people who are new. This is your first event, so welcome. We're very happy to have you. The River Run Network started back in 2016, and we are now very close to 2,000 members. Maybe with you all joining, we're going to be right there, but it's very exciting to see the growth of this and interest from the community and getting you all out doing projects. So we'll talk more about that later. It looks like hiking is the majority. A lot of people get out through hiking. Backpacking is a lot smaller, car camping, and then quite a few people who said all of the above. And it looks like the majority of our audience is somewhat familiar with mountains and watersheds of Southern Arizona. So, great. Lauren, if you could take that poll down. And we're going to get started with, let's see. I think Trevor is going to get us started putting up the map and walking us through the major mountain ranges and watersheds, rivers to explore in Southern Arizona. I think he's going to, he and Sky are going to talk a little bit about land ownership as well.
I can't find my map now.
Well, while you're finding the map, maybe, oh, you got it?
I'm getting it right now.
I can go over land ownership briefly.
That'd be great.
So in terms of land that's kind of open for public access, the main categories would be Forest Service land, which is most of the Sky Islands in southeastern Arizona, of course, which you can basically camp most anywhere unless there's specific signs saying you can't. BLM land is also in a similar, mostly lower elevation, but there's some in the middle elevations. BLM land is completely open to camping wherever you want, dispersed camping. Then state land is kind of quasi-public. It's generally, you can go on it, but you really, to be fully legal, you should get either a hunting permit or they have a more generic use permit for state lands, which you should really get to use state lands. But there are a lot of state lands, and some of them are pretty nice, so definitely worth perhaps getting that if you're going to spend more time out. And then there are like Park Service lands, national wildlife refuges like Buenos Aires. So those are the main categories. And then much of the valley bottoms in most of the in most areas have quite a bit of private land, of course.
So yeah, as we go fly around here, we'll point out, as we're talking about areas, we will let you know the land ownership and any type of restrictions or anything. Of course, right now, fires are not allowed on any of the public lands. That will change here in the next couple weeks as the monsoons arrive or continue to arrive. So here we are, we're at our office here, Watershed Management Group, Living Lab and Learning Center, Dodge and Speedway. And it looks like just a normal city. But then, let's do this. We are surrounded by amazing wildlands here. Of course, you all know this. You see these mountains every day. We've got the Catalinas on the north and the Rincons to the east. I have not spent a whole lot of time in the Catalinas. I know Lisa and Catlow definitely have spent a lot more time in the Catalinas than I have. But I'll tell you, in one of my favorite places, it is pretty low right now and pretty warm, but it sure is a beautiful place, and it's very close to Tucson. And that's over here on the back side of the Rincon Mountains. This is called Happy Valley right here. And the little Rincons over here. And it's just got wonderful hiking. It is low in the valley, but and it's straight up to hike up into the Rincons. However, you can come over here and hike around in the little Rincons also, and there's a wonderful place called Marble Canyon that's well worth visiting. Sky, have you spent any time in Happy Valley? You have any good points over there?
I have, but it's been a while, but it is beautiful, and it's not real high elevation, but it's high enough that it has really large oaks, and it's very beautiful, and there's definitely some nice dispersed camping areas. And the hike up to Happy Valley Saddle is steep, but once you get there, it's incredible. It's a very beautiful place and a great backpacking area.
Right.
Yeah, I would just add that it's definitely a backpacking destination, and you will need to pack water. Yeah. There are some springs and small creeks, but it's very likely they will not have water. So don't plan on water. You have to pack in your water.
Yep.
Yeah, and so if you look at if you get the topo maps for your hike or your backpack in, there's springs all over the place, but there's no guarantee those springs are actually flowing. So yeah, you have to be super careful out here.
And certainly there's a lot of water after the monsoons start, various places and pools and stuff, but there's never a guarantee.
So, and then right across, so this is the San Pedro River here, of course. Right across the valley from the Rincons is one of the wildest Sky Islands, one of the wildest mountain ranges we have in this area. This is the Galiuro Mountains. At the north end of it, right here, is Tubac Canyon. And one of my favorite places in the Sky Islands and it is a long drive. Klondike right here, you drive up the Aravaipa Valley from Wilcox, and you come into the Aravaipa Canyon, and this is Turkey Creek right here, and it's right on the boundary. This is all wilderness area, so of course there's no roads, no driving in, but you can drive into Turkey Creek and camp under the sycamores, and it is one of the most gorgeous places in the area. And of course Aravaipa Creek is perennial through here, so you can camp fairly close to Aravaipa Creek in Turkey Canyon and just walk down to the creek and frolic in the water.
And there's generally almost always water in Turkey Creek as well. I agree with Trevor. It's one of the more pretty places to camp around, to vehicle camp. You do have to cross Aravaipa Creek a few times to get in there, so not a place to go really in the monsoon season generally, but it is gorgeous. Another
amazing place is Redfield Canyon. What's the name of the Nature Conservancy preserve there? Muleshoe.
Yeah, that's just south of there.
So but yeah, it's one of these canyons right here.
That's it right there. That's Redfield.
And of course, it's all wilderness on the top of this mountain range. So great backpacking. Again, full of springs, but there's no guarantee that any of those springs have water in them. So this is a place, they don't look very high and they don't look very rough, but when you get in there, it's some of the roughest backpacking I've ever encountered in my life. But there's great car camping just past the Muleshoe Preserve of the Nature Conservancy, at a confluence of Redfield Canyon and Bass Canyon. And Bass Canyon is the only canyon, the only creek I've seen in the Sky Island region that it's really interesting. The whole thing is held together by the roots of the trees in there. There's ash trees and walnut trees, and their roots have formed underneath the creek bed, and now it's a series of step pools that are held in place by the roots of these trees. It's just an amazing hike in there, and a decent road to get into that confluence, and a big open valley to camp in right there. So I always encourage people to check that out.
It's very pretty, and I had a really interesting experience there where I got to actually see the creek go up and down based on what time of day it was and how much water the riparian trees were using. So that was pretty interesting. I'll talk a tiny bit about the Galleros because they're also one of my favorite places. It's a great place to backpack because they're more than other mountain ranges. They have quite a bit more water, and there are some trails, although they're not that well maintained, so you can't always find them. But there are quite an extensive system of trails, quite a bit of water relatively, and just really large wilderness areas and beautiful canyons and just gorgeous scenery. They're less known, so there's not very many people that go there. And there are quite a few car camping places on the east side of the Galleros, a few roads that go up in the canyons a little ways. And then on that north side near Aravaipa, of course, too. Great place.
This is the Winchesters, which are just south of the Galleros and just north of I-10. There's some beautiful country right between those two mountain ranges, some big mesas and stuff at about 5,000 feet. So it's not super hot during the summer. I'll also mention, if you're a history buff, on the north end, kind of close to
Rattlesnake Canyon.
Right here, somewhere up here is Powers Cabin. And it has quite an interesting history of some brothers who were draft dodgers, and the Graham County Sheriff paid them a visit, and there was a giant shootout. And it's part of the lore of Graham County over here. Another interesting thing is you drive up this canyon, you will pass the Peyote Way Church of God, the only church in the U.S. that's legally allowed to use peyote. So pretty interesting place. Where should
I did a backpack in the Galleros all the way from Aravaipa Canyon out through the Redfield Canyon. One time. It was the longest backpack I think I've ever done. It was like a week long, basically.
Some
Trevor,
other,
if you could show kind of zoomed out a few more mountain ranges, and I think we want to show some of the pictures that we've prepared too.
I was just going to mention another spot here in the Aravaipa region. If you're here, there is a ghost town. So this is the Santa Teresa Mountains right north of Aravaipa Canyon. And up a drainage called Stowe Gulch is the old ghost town of Aravaipa. And it's a pretty cool place too. So I'm going to zoom back out. We'll go in and talk about Graham. But
I'm just going to answer a question really quick. I went there in the spring, and I had to plan very carefully ahead of time to make sure there are a lot of springs in the Galleros. And so I went from one spring to another for water. And you have to be really careful, of course, doing that because they might not be there, but I was able to do that.
Yeah. Do you want to share some pictures of some of these sites, Sky?
Sure. Should we just go through the whole slideshow now, or how do you want to do that, Lisa?
Trevor, can you just point out the mountains to the ranges to the south, the Huachucas and the Chiricahuas before we switch over?
Yeah. So
And Santa Rita's.
here's the region here. So we were just visiting the Galleros here. Here's Mount Graham. I think a lot of people are very familiar with that, the Winchester Mountains. But then we come down to these borderland mountain ranges, and they have a different feel than our mountain ranges north of I-10. And in fact, north of I-10 has been identified by biogeographers as almost the Mason-Dixon line of animal and plant life, where the more tropical species that occur down here don't go farther north than I-10, and the more temperate species in these mountain ranges generally don't go south of I-10. So it's kind of an interesting area, but we've got tons of opportunities south of Tucson. So we start here, Santa Rita Mountains right here. This is Las Ciénegas National Conservation Area. Beautiful, beautiful area. Cienega Creek's flowing through there. Pretty hot right now. It's at about 4,000, 4,500 feet. So it's pretty hot during the summer.
Although once the monsoons really ramp up, that area becomes absolutely gorgeous and very green. And it's humid and warm, but once the monsoons really get going, it's not unbearable.
So as you drive down the Sonoyta Highway, you go over the Empire Pass right here and drop into the Sonoyta Valley. It turns from brown desert on the north side of the Empire Mountains to, it looks like you're entering Ireland when you drive into the valley. It's so green in September, late August and September. Just to the east of Las Ciénegas and the Santa Ritas is the Whetstone Mountain. No. Yeah, Whetstone. Yeah. And there's a little bit of access into the high country from the west. And there's one great access point from the east called French Joe Canyon. And then we won't spend any time on that. And then
that's good dispersed camping, just so people know, and it's really close to Tucson.
Right. Then we have the Canelo Hills here. So we've got the Santa Rita's here, Patagonia's right here, and then the Patagonia Mountains are right here. It's interesting because the Patagonia Mountains cross the border right here. And same with the Huachuca Mountains. A little bit of the Huachuca Mountains sits in Mexico. And
French Joe Canyon.
Yeah, these two mountains are connected by the Canelo Hills here. Just beautiful rolling grasslands. And then you get down into San Rafael Valley. And again, pretty low. It's like 4,500 feet. This is a remnant shortgrass prairie. The only occurrence of shortgrass prairie in southern Arizona. Grass up to your belt buckle. Just a beautiful area. But you want to share pictures, or you want to talk about the Huachucas a little bit, Sky?
Or Chiricahuas too?
Chiricahuas.
Lisa?
Just show where they are on the map, and we'll switch to the pictures.
Okay, so Huachucas, and then we have the Mule Mountains. The Mule Mountains is where Bisbee sits. The Dragoon Mountains are right here. Little Dragoons north of the highway. This is Texas Canyon. But then we come over to this massive complex of mountains with the Dos Cabezas, the Chiricahuas. We've got the Swiss Helms and the forgetting what those mountains are, Sky, right there.
That's the Swiss Alps right there that you're hovering.
Okay, and then this is the other, why am I forgetting its name?
They're pretty small.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's look at some photos, Sky, if you want to pull those up. Thanks, Trevor.
Yep, I'll stop.
There's so much to explore in southern Arizona. It's really incredible.
Let me start at the top. So
I think
the first few are Lisa's photos. Do you want to go over those yourself, Lisa?
Yeah. So these photos here are from a trip that Catlo and I just did because we were had to replan our summer staycation. But we had all sorts of plans that ended up, well, some of them going up in flames literally because we were going to go to Mount Lemmon. But we decided for a backpacking trip to go into the Santa Rita Mountains, which we have spent a lot of time there but never backpacked. And we're familiar with some trails that had springs that we thought, as Sky mentioned, you have to very carefully plan these trips if you're going to backpack to understand the water sources. So we weren't planning to go very far. We just wanted to get up in elevation and find some place with water so we wouldn't have to haul in a bunch of water. So there's a trail called Kent Springs Trail, and that's what these pictures are from. The spring featured here is Sylvester Spring. You can go ahead to the next photo. The Sylvester Spring pretty much always has water. This is another area in the Santa Rita Mountains on Four Springs Trail, Moore Springs. I didn't get a picture, I forgot to take a picture of Kent Springs, but that is a big water source for the residents down in Madera Canyon. So this spring was in a burned area, and it was still flowing, and it was like a little green pocket in this big burned area on the other side of the mountain from Kent Springs. A little day hike in there. I'll go ahead to the next slide. And then we ended up we camped at Kent Springs, but then we went into a canyon adjacent to Kent Springs that were on trails that aren't on any of our maps. So I don't know exactly what they're called and they're not labeled, but there was a lot of water in there and some beautiful places, very shaded. So I think we're about 6,000 to 7,000 feet in elevation camping, and very comfortable during the day and then cooled off at night. So nice destination for a little backpacking. Day hiking there is excellent too.
Okay. The rest of the photos are ones I've taken a few different places just to give a sense for what they look like, really. This is in the Canelo Hills, which is kind of southeast of Sonoita, and looking south toward the Patagonia Mountains over the San Rafael Valley. That's kind of like rolling oak hills, oak savanna, and grasslands, real grasslands in the San Rafael Valley. This is not in the summer, so if it was, all that yellow would be bright green. Just a couple photos from the Chiricahuas. This is near Rustler Park. Was a fire up there. I don't remember which year exactly, but some of the areas that have burned are really green and have a lot of flowers right now. This is in the same area, just a view. The Chiricahuas are huge, of course. They have a really big basal area, so there's a lot of canyons and a lot of places to go there. Oh, this popped in here. I didn't realize this was here.
I could talk about it. Yeah, sorry, I put it in there because it was Chiricahuas. So another spot we were just at last week and also had water in the middle of June, so that's always promising. And this is Sycamore Campground, so it is a formal campground, but pretty small one, and it's pretty spread out. It was not busy. We were there over the weekend. And there's also dispersed camping all along the road there, Turkey Creek. And this was a little waterfall and dipping pool that was like less than a quarter mile from the campground. So nice
That's
spot.
it's on the southwest side of the Chiricahua, is one of the larger canyons. The Dragoon Mountains are basically monument quality for their beauty and their amazing rock formations. And there are quite a few dispersed camping areas, especially on the west side, off north from Middle March Road along the west side of the Chiricahuas. I mean the Dragoons, and it is really a special place and very gorgeous. Kind of like maybe a spring, fall type camping area. You could camp there in the summer if you don't mind the heat, but you know, late summer and early fall would be prime time. This is where we talked about earlier, Bass Canyon and Hot Spring Canyon on the southwest side of the Galliero Mountains. So it's pretty dry uplands, but there's the riparian areas are very beautiful and lush. This is Redfield Canyon in the Gallieros, a little ways on the west side too, but a little ways north of those last canyons. It is one of the premier riparian areas that always has water, and the region has 7 or 8 species of native fish. It's very, very beautiful. There's incredibly huge, beautiful rock formations. It's a great backpacking location. And this is where we talked about it, Turkey Creek at the north end of, next to Aravaipa Canyon at the north end of the Gallieros. Huge riparian trees, big, beautiful cliffs, water, very beautiful spot.
There's also a small cliff dwelling in Turkey Creek that's kind of cool.
There is. These are people for scale right here. These are humans.
Nice.
So just last week, actually, I was on Mount Graham, which is, of course, the tallest sky island. It tops out at over 10,700 feet. So there's mixed conifer and even spruce fir limestone at the top. It's fairly busy, you know, a lot of people go there because it's, especially right now, because the Catalinas are burning and it's really high and cool. It was actually cold up there. So there's a few dispersed areas and some other developed campgrounds. So there's a lot of options. Also, right this minute, a few of them are closed. So it makes everything a little tighter for camping, but there's still places to be found. It's really an amazing place if you've never been there. Very montane, and there's numerous creeks that have water even this time of year at the top. Here's another photo of the end of Moonshine Creek as it drops off the mountain. Very beautiful spot.
Yeah, and I'll mention a great dispersed area on Mount Graham is right where the asphalt ends on the road is Treasure Park. And down at the bottom of Treasure Park, there's a small creek that you cross, and then some great dispersed camping along some giant boulders. And you have easy walking access to the Grant Overlook area, the Grant Hill Overlook that overlooks the Aravaipa Valley. Amazing views.
Yeah, that's a great area. Although at this minute, Treasure Park is closed, I think, because they're doing some restoration type work there. Right now, I just saw that.
Okay.
This is the Patagonia Mountains, which are basically south of Patagonia, between Patagonia and the San Rafael Valley. It's mostly oak woodland and it's really beautiful, and it's one of the more diverse biologically places around. It feels very much like the Sierra Madre of Mexico. In monsoon season, it's very moist and just a oak woodland area. It's pretty nice. Lots of dispersed camping opportunities in certain areas. This is a picture from the edge of the Patagonia Mountains on the edge of the San Rafael Valley.
With the Huachucas in the background.
Yep, those are the Huachuca Mountains in the background.
And that is Bog Hole Wildlife Area in the foreground right there.
Yeah. And this is a nice hiking canyon in Box Canyon in the Santa Ritas. We took a day hike here a couple months ago, and there was quite a bit of water. And it's really not that far from Tucson. It took us 45 minutes, maybe 50 minutes to get there. It's at the
Florida Canyon also has a nice trail going up it and doesn't get the use that the Madera Canyon gets. So these two canyons are much lonelier areas.
This is actually in Madera Canyon. On May 31st, I think it was, we got rained on, which is very unusual, but it was quite a bit of rain and lightning. But of course, the Santa Ritas just generally are a really nice mountain range. They have a lot of different types of places to go, a lot of backpacking opportunity, and a lot of, especially on the east side, there's a ton of dispersed camping opportunities, and on this kind of the southeast side as well, and some other areas too. Oh, and then we jump over to actually, which we didn't talk about, is the Tubac Concrete area, which is basically west of Nogales. It's very kind of rugged, rolling hill area, a little lower than some of the other sky islands, but also a gorgeous area, very diverse biologically also. This is just north of where the road crosses Sycamore Canyon. Ruby Road crosses Sycamore Canyon. Really good dispersed camping area and good access for hiking down Sycamore Canyon, which always has water.
And great swimming holes.
Good swimming holes. This is Sycamore Canyon. The road is actually not bad at all. If you're comfortable driving even a smaller car on dirt roads, you can make it. Higher clearance would be better, but it's actually not bad. That Ruby Road is not bad.
Yeah, and I suggested to somebody earlier that they come in from Aravaca.
Yep.
They have more pavement.
There's less bumpy road conditions on the way in if you come from Aravaca instead of from I-19.
And there's another great spot near Sycamore Canyon, the ghost town of Ruby. And it costs a little bit of money to visit it. It's privately owned by some great people here in Tucson, but they also have a bat roost in an old mine at it that tens of thousands of bats live there. And so
hundreds of thousands.
So in the evenings, you can go in and pay your couple dollars to go in and park and walk over to the mine and stand there, and just these plumes of bats are coming out. It's really quite the spectacle and well worth visiting.
With red-tailed hawks flying around trying to catch the bats in front of you.
So I'll go ahead and share my screen again with the map, and maybe we can take a closer look at, I have the Chiricahuas on right now.
Yeah, Trevor, if we could just spend another couple minutes on that, and then I want to shift gears to some of our backpacking, camping, hiking, stewardship practices that we want to cover today.
Sounds good. So some of the areas we were talking about, this is the road into Turkey Creek that Lisa shared the picture of in Catlow in the creek there. That creek dried up many years ago, probably in response to erosion, overgrazing in the mountains. And then a couple, the Austins, bought a ranch in here, took the cows off, had their crew members start building one rock dams and trincheras in the upper watershed. And in the creek proper, the downstream neighbors sued them for taking his water right away from him, even though it was a dry creek. And as that suit was winding its way through the courts, the creek just one day started flowing again into response into she's put about 30, her name is Valere Clark now, has put about 30,000 rock structures in these drainages that feed into Turkey Creek. The creek came up, started flowing one day. It has not stopped flowing since. Also, Johnny Ringo is buried out there. I've never stopped to see his grave, but it'd be kind of cool. One of my favorite areas is actually up on top in the wilderness. And you get there, you come up, Forest Road 42 goes all the way up and over to Paradise and Portal. But at the very top is Barfoot Park and Rustler Park. Rustler's the developed campground, and Barfoot is the undeveloped campground. We always camp in Barfoot. There's also some great camping on the road coming up, Pinery Saddle, or Pinery Canyon, and some other spots there. But if you go into Rustler, there's a trailhead that takes you up, very easily get you up into the very highest areas here, Fly Peak, Chiricahua Peak. I often go up Fly Peak and then there's a trail that comes over here, and I was looking at my maps, but I couldn't find the point. It's called Scintilla Point, and it's an overlook of Cave Creek Canyon here. But the interesting thing about it, when you're up here looking to the east, you can also see the Dragoon Mountains that sit just to the east of Las Cruces, New Mexico, which has got to be 300 or 400 miles away. So the views from on top here are just amazing. Lisa, did you go up to the top with Catlow to Chiricahua Peak when you were there last week?
Callow went to a lot of peaks running. I stayed in camp.
That's how I like to camp, is sit in camp and read. But then just gorgeous over here. Cave Creek Canyon is just an amazing place. It's super famous for its birds. This area has a greater diversity of breeding raptors than anywhere else in North America.
Isn't it one of the most diverse for reptiles, Trevor, just out in the valley in that area generally also?
Yeah, so again, a super highly diverse area for reptiles. In this area, you get grassland, eastern grassland species like the Massasauga, the little venomous pit viper. Then you have all the montane rattlesnake species. You've got a great diversity of lizards, both down in the desert around here. Some very famous places in the herpetological literature are in this area. Yeah, just one of the most highly diverse mountain ranges we have. And then Portal's got a little restaurant in it. It's a neat little town. Tons of retired biologists live over here. It's also a hot spot for astronomy. So as you drive, you can come in from the north through the desert into Portal, and all these houses out here all have their own mini observatories on them. It's pretty cool. Where else should we go in here, Sky?
You want to talk about the Huachuca area?
Yeah, let's do that. Oh, I will mention Leslie Canyon Wildlife Refuge is somewhere down here too. There it is right there. Really neat place, a very small national wildlife refuge, well worth visiting. Lots of water, that's why it's the refuge. There's also over here is the San Bernardino Wildlife Refuge is right here along the border. And there's a great story on the San Bernardino and points south as this flows into Mexico in the latest high country news about native fish. This is a drainage that flows south into Mexico. It's the Rio Yaqui. It is not in the Colorado River watershed. So this is about the only drainage in Arizona that isn't in the Colorado River watershed. There's one more over here.
Southwest Arizona too. There's a little bit that drains to this Gulf directly.
So in the Huachucas just are full of options from all sides. From the north side here is Fort Huachuca. This is Garden Canyon coming up right here. It is permissible for citizens to come onto the base. You have to stop and get a permit. You have to prove you're a US citizen. But Garden Canyon has tons of picnic areas and dispersed camping areas. It's frequented by the Army personnel here, lots of picnickers during the weekends, but just a beautiful canyon. And then there's a series of canyons along this coming out of Sierra Vista, including a nature conservancy preserve in Ramsey Canyon. There's a great little bed and breakfast in Miller Canyon. It's an apple farm or an apple orchard, and a great bread and breakfast, and just great hiking out of those sites, both the Nature Conservancy. And then you can drive pretty far up to a recreation site called Carr Canyon coming out of Sierra Vista. However, my favorite has always been this western side of the the Huachucas. A great just road trip to show your elderly grandparents when they're visiting you here is to come through and go through Montezuma Pass right here in the Coronado National Memorial. I think it's right here. And then this road takes you all the way across the San Rafael Valley, through the Patagonias, down Harshaw Creek to Patagonia, and then Patagonia back to Sonoyta and back north to Tucson. So it's a great day trip to show somebody if you don't have a lot of time. But
one of the more beautiful road trip kind of driving scenery areas, I would say, in southern Arizona, especially after the monsoons have started and it's greened up.
So tons of opportunities for dispersed camping in these western canyons. Ida Canyon, I think, is right here. And at the very top of Ida Canyon is Bear Spring. And it's one of the wildest, craziest springs I've ever seen. It's got probably about 1/10 of an acre of open water. It's completely in the shade, and it's very luxurious and verdant. And then that creek, that Spring-Fed Creek, actually flows all the way down into Mexico. And then right here is a nature conservancy and pro natura preserve called the Los Fresnos Preserve. So some of it's private in here, but the majority of this is all Forest Service land. So just tons of dispersed camping. This is Campini Mesa here. So
one area where the Forest Service land actually goes all the way down substantially into the valley, and there's quite a bit of Forest Service land in the valley.
And they've actually been doing quite a bit of restoration work here on Campini Mesa. So the grassland is coming back that had been invaded by junipers in this area.
Hey, Trevor. Trevor, I want to get us to get into a few other topics, and the hour's going by very quickly. We really needed more time for this topic because we could go on forever.
I'll just point out 2 more places here. So here's Parker Canyon Lake. Up above Parker Canyon Lake is Scotia Canyon, and it's got a spring-fed swimming hole up here that's an amazing spot. So if people are interested in that, I can give you more information.
Thank you. I think we have so many good ideas. I know touched on briefly, but hopefully I see people taking notes, so that's good. So one of our favorite topics is to talk about how to poop in the woods. And we want to make sure that everyone's comfortable doing that and understands what are the best practices. And that you're going to need to know that whether you're day hiking or camping. And well, especially this spring, a lot of facilities were closed, even at places like Sabino Canyon. So wanted to start by asking Skye if you could tell us some techniques for whether you're hiking or backpacking. What are some best practices for pooping in the woods?
I'll start with the overview, which is that like Lisa was we were talking about the other day, is that actually pooping in the woods is, you don't have to think about it as contaminating the woods, because you're not, if you do it properly. It's actually beneficial for the soil, and so it's really not a problem as long as the basic idea is to keep it hidden from other people, so you get away from anywhere people regularly frequent, and then to make sure you bury it at least a few to 6 or 10 inches in the ground any place you can. If you can't, there are other techniques you might have to pack out, or you just have to find rocks that you can lift up to use. But really, if you follow the rules of getting away from people, you bury it along with your toilet paper. You really don't have to worry about it as long as you're away from people and in areas that have a lot of human use and creeks. So basically, otherwise it will decompose very quickly, including your toilet paper, into soil. So you really don't have to worry that you're contaminating an area.
What about distance? If there is a spring or creek nearby, how far away should you be?
I would say at least 40 to 50 feet, maybe. It depends a little bit on topography and the soil and stuff, but yeah, as long as you stay a little ways away, you should be fine, especially if there's not a lot of people doing it in the area. If there is a really heavily used area, then I would go farther.
Thank you. And Trevor, if you could talk a little bit about if you're at a camp spot, back maybe dispersed camping, what are some ways you could set up like a camp toilet in essence?
Yeah, so I've done this frequently, and with both Sky and Alliance and with Watershed Management Group when we go out, basically digging a trench or a large hole and bringing some sort of a sit-upon with you that you can put over the top of it works really well with a group of people. Some sort of sheet that you can have some privacy. We had a camp or a staff retreat on Mount Graham, and we did a bathroom build-off, and we built 3 different bathrooms. And the bathroom that I think it was Catlow, Sky, myself, and one other of our staffers, we built a outdoor privy with a view. So just beautiful view looking over a canyon as we sat there in the morning. And basically, yeah, we brought something to sit on it with the toilet seat on it, dug a hole about 2.5 feet deep, and then you poop, you leave your toilet paper there, grab some of the soil from when you dug it out and cover it up. And you can do that deep with just a hole, or you could do it if you're in shallow soil or can't dig deep, you could do a trench where you just fill it up and you keep moving down the trench. I've also in the past have used when we were going to be using the toilet for over a week, like Sky and I do these expeditions with all these scientists down into Mexico, and we use what is that stuff called? Some sort of a potassium, Sky, what is it? I'm forgetting, that you can throw on.
I don't remember.
But the dirt works just as well.
Yep.
And you're filling.
We could answer.
So there's been some conversation in the feed, and I think I posted a video I think a month ago about how to poop in the woods and got a lot of feedback on that. And there's this concept, there's the leave no trace. I think Jonathan posted that. There's also this concept of pack it out. Pima County recently put out a big bulletin about when you're out recreating for 4th of July to pack out your toilet paper. I thought that was very interesting that they put that blanket statement out there, because there are many safe ways to compost toilet paper. So I know everyone might line up slightly differently on that, but I think one of the things I just wanted to dispel is the idea that you always have to pack it out, because human waste and toilet paper all are compostable. So if we understand how composting works and how to keep our creeks and springs safe, and you should be able to do that safely most of the time. Sky or Trevor, can you talk about a few instances where you might want to pack it out?
Basically, when there's no soil to bury it, or it's a really, really dry place where it may not decompose properly. Personally, I think that toilet paper decomposes, well, I've seen it in action, it decomposes very quickly in the top layer of any real soil, especially if it gets wet. If you are concerned about it, you could wet it when you bury it. It might make it a little quicker, but it happens pretty quickly. So personally, I do not think you need to pack out toilet paper unless you have a specific reason to, such as like if you were in canyon lands and there's no soil, it's just bedrock or some other reason like that. I do take, and that's a good point, is that if you don't have a shovel, generally most places you can either find a stick strong enough to dig a hole deep enough, or sometimes what I will do is use half-buried rocks or logs that you can pop up and get an automatic hole.
And Summit Hut and REI, of course, have little foldable shovels that you can stick in your pack for $5 or $6, super lightweight. So I have one of those that I take with me.
Thank you. So I wanted to just see what other practices in terms of making sure that we're looking after the health of our watershed and keeping our springs and creeks healthy, what other practices should we be thinking about when we're out camping or backpacking?
Well, we live in, as we said, a very highly biodiverse area. So there are some safety considerations when you're out there with animals. I'm a herpetologist. I studied rattlesnakes for many years. The rattlesnakes are not the most dangerous animal out there. The bears are not the most dangerous animal out there. The jaguar might be if you run into a jaguar, but cougars, mountain lions are not the most dangerous animal out there. The most dangerous animal out there are Africanized honeybees. So something to just keep in mind and be highly vigilant about not disturbing honeybees at their nests. They become very aggressive, defending. They think you're a bear, gonna steal all their honey. And people can get stung tens of thousands of times, and people die every year from these stings. And all of our honeybees are Africanized, even the ones that are in hives that people produce honey with. So that is the most fearful thing I see out there. So just being aware, but also there are rattlesnakes. There are plenty of biting, stinging, venomous insects out there. So just, you know, watching where you're stepping, shaking out your sleeping bag if it's on the ground before you get in it, shaking your shoes out in the morning before you stick your feet back into your shoes. Kind of common sense stuff that you probably all heard before. And then bears are sometimes an issue, especially in areas where people potentially could be feeding them. Mount Lemmon, the top of the Mount Graham area where the cabins are, over in the Chiricahuas, it's happened a few times where bears become habituated to humans, and they can be real problems. I have never had a bear come into one of our camps and raid us, but it happens all the time. So keeping a clean camp, locking your food in your cooler in the car every night, and when you're off hiking, don't leave your cooler out. Do your dishes in the evening when you're done, and throw out your dirty water, disperse it out onto the landscape a little bit, and just try to keep as clean a camp as possible to preclude any bears coming into camp. There are camp robbers in each of these mountain ranges, coatis, ringtail cats, and Mexican jays are famous for robbing camps.
And skunks as well.
And skunks.
Which are almost in every campground in every dispersed area. So you definitely have to clean up from little critters too, especially if you're worried about your food getting munched, which I've had that problem numerous times.
So
still learning.
Speaking of dishes, what are practices around washing your dishes or washing your hands? And if you're near a creek, are you washing your dishes in the creek, or are you doing something else?
Can we answer the question, then we'll get to that real quick?
Yep. Food storage.
Yeah. So backpacking, really the best thing to do is bring a bag that you can fit all your food in, and a long piece of rope. Like a parachute cord works really well, and it's light, to hang your food at least 8 feet off the ground and a couple feet down a branch and out from the trunk of the tree. They do have bear-proof containers, which I've never used, but that is another option. But hanging it is really what you want to be doing when you're backpacking, and also from other food robbers. Yeah.
So for washing your dishes, the way I like to do it is I bring a compost bucket, scrape super clean your dishes, wash them in soapy water, rinse them, put them out to dry. And then at the end of that, just spreading that water out into the forest, way away from any water body, would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and I did my dishes in the creek on Mount Graham, for example, and as long as you don't put a lot of food, there's not a lot of food left on your dishes, you can just take a little bit of water away from the creek in a bucket or something and do your dishes, and then spread that water out on the landscape a little ways away from the creek. If it's a larger river or something, which isn't very common around here, you can, not worry quite as much about it. but you definitely can wash your things in the creek. Although, you know, if you're worried about giardia or other things, you know, that's a concern, but I've never had a problem personally.
Great, thank you. Speaking of, what about drinking water when you're out and backpacking or backcountry when you find these springs and creeks?
You basically have to make sure you have something that can either filter very well or use something like iodine to make sure you're killing any potential pathogens in the water. But generally, you basically have to not count on any specific spring unless you absolutely know that has water, or a creek or something as a water source. You pack in all your water that you need, which could be a lot. When I packed for 5 days into the Rincons, we didn't know if the spring up there would have water, so I backpacked in 4.5 gallons of water, which was pretty burdensome. But,
Yeah, a gallon of water weighs 8 pounds, so.
Yeah. You basically just have to bite the bullet and always take plenty of water. I would take a minimum of a gallon just for a day hike right now for one person.
Yeah, and like I said, you know, on your topo maps or whatever maps you're looking at, you will see tons of springs out in these mountain ranges. But unless you have firsthand knowledge that somebody recently visited there and had water there, I would not trust that.
Yeah.
It's so temporal.
There certainly is a lot of water on the landscape in certain places. So, you know, especially once the monsoons have started and been going for a while, if you're creative and you know how canyons work and which canyons could have water just by looking at your topo map and their size and things, there often is a lot of water on the landscape in certain places.
So there was a question earlier, Wanda P asked, what about buffalo grass removal or other invasives? Wanda, I'm not sure I understand your question, but are you asking if we should, when we're out seeing these things, if we should be removing them? Perhaps, yes, that's the question.
So well, you know, it depends on if it's something you think you can tackle and actually get rid of it in you know, an afternoon or just a quick stop. I would encourage you. The one thing about buffalo grass is, unless it's green and just starting to put seed heads on, if you're pulling that out of the ground, you could be loosening all those seeds and then spreading them around. The Desert Museum has some great ideas on how to deal with those more remote locations on their website. One thing they do, if you can get it before they seed out, is you just pull it and leave it in place. The best way, if you find locations with populations of especially buffalo grass, that stink net, the globe chamomile, is to report it to the land management agencies. If it's in the Tucson Basin or in Pima County, that would be Pima County and the Desert Museum. If it was out anywhere else in the region on Forest Service or BLM land, you would report to the BLM or the Forest Service district office for that area.
So we just have a few minutes left here. One thing I wanted to cover before we finish is this, well, how this all relates to the current pandemic and us recreating responsibly and safely. There's been a lot of recommendations to stay regional, to stay local. So, and that's important for many reasons, including not overwhelming maybe smaller tourist areas that don't have the services to handle people during a pandemic. What about also any other sensitive areas, or no, we have more at-risk populations in parts of Arizona? Sky or Trevor, any comments on that, on making sure that we're being responsible where we recreate?
It's, again, just keep your social distancing. And like Lisa mentioned, most of the developed areas, their bathrooms are closed. They may be open and allowing you to camp there, but the bathrooms are closed. So just being prepared and washing your hands. I mean, even if you're out, you should be washing your hands frequently anyway. Just, And then, you know, trails are narrow, so just being aware of your surroundings, and you don't want to come face to face with somebody who's coming the other way. So just being aware, you know, the person who's going uphill always has the right of way. So if you're coming downhill and somebody's approaching, get well away from the trail and let them pass. Say hello, ask them if they've seen any cool birds, but please, you know, keep your distance.
It's definitely a good time right now to try and at least maybe look for some less traveled areas to disperse, because there is more, there are more people out right now than usual. Mount Graham was actually a kind of a madhouse at Riggs Lake at the end of the road up there. So those are definitely a kind of a bad scene for spreading virus in places where there's just way too many people in a small area. So maybe it's a good time to try and go to some less utilized areas right now.
Yeah, somebody just mentioned wear a mask if you're on a busy trail. So yeah, definitely have your mask with you. I saw a question about dogs. I take my dog everywhere when I'm camping and hiking. There are areas where dogs are prohibited, such as the Push Ridge Wilderness area because of the sheep up there. So just checking with the local office of your local land management, whether that's Forest Service or BLM, to see if there's any restrictions. So another one about, are there hiking clubs for single peoples? There are, and there's a Tucson meetup. I'm not single, so I'm not sure about that, but I think for sure there's probably a singles club out there.
All right, we're gonna wrap up here shortly. I also just wanted to mention, in thinking about, again, safe practices right now, not overwhelming certain communities. If you are considering at all visiting any lands that are Native American communities, reservation lands, that would be very, well, one, you have to get permits for a lot of these areas, and they may not be allowing you to do that right now. So just be aware of what lands those are, and know that those communities are needing to stay distant from people right now, just as all of us are, but perhaps more so. So just being really respectful, again, of the various communities and their needs throughout the state as you're out recreating, knowing we're all coming from different places with that. Okay, so I just wanted to mention our next upcoming events. We have an event next week with Trevor on pulling invasive species. So it will be a virtual workshop. We will be giving you the skills to do it yourself, and then hoping that you all get out to do that in your own neighborhood or local arroyo the following day. And then the week after, we have a virtual workshop on planting with the monsoon rain. So please sign up for those if you haven't seen those yet. And we are doing a special summer challenge we're calling our Triple Crown. So if you participate in 3 of the events where you actually go out and do things, pulling invasives, picking up trash, planting in the monsoons, you'll qualify for our Triple Crown prize, which will also include in the future, when we can go out and do this, field trip along the San Pedro, doing some monitoring of the beaver population out there. So pretty cool thing. Hope you all participate in that. We're hoping to motivate you to get out and do things in your own yard and neighborhood while we can't get together to do them in a big group. So again, thank you. Any last words from Trevor or Sky?
I can stay on for a few minutes if anybody has burning questions, or I don't know if Trevor can too, but.
Yeah, and both Sky and I's emails are on the website. So if you have specifics about any of these areas, somebody was asking about maps. Catlow mentioned are they green lines maps? They're the trail maps. But then both the Forest Service and the BLM produce their own maps, recreation maps. And I don't know if they're open right now, but the Arizona Geological Survey is down at the state building right there off of Congress and Main Street, and they sell all those maps. The BLM surface management maps are great maps to get because they actually show land ownership. So you know you're not trespassing on private property, or the place you want to go is on state land and you're going to need a permit from them, a recreational permit.
Yeah, the BLM maps and the Forest Service map.
They have all the maps too.
So it sounds like Sky and Trevor can stay on for maybe 5 more minutes. If you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, feel free to do that.
I just posted a link to a place where you can go on the USGS store. It's a link to that, and you can actually download all of their topo maps, pretty detailed maps for free there. So it's a really good resource, especially backpacking or kind of going places that are less developed.
And those are PDFs that you download, and you can take those to a local print shop, and it costs about $2 or $3 for a full color print of those at full size. So it's a great way to get topo maps.
Somebody asked about cell phone coverage. I'm not the best person to answer that, but I have some experience at least. It's the maps that they provide don't really tell the whole story. When you're on the ground, it varies so much depending on topography and where you are and your coverage, your company, etc. I mean, it's really hard.
I've been and I hate them because I pay them so much money, but Verizon has probably the best coverage for southeastern Arizona. But you get into areas and you're not going to get cell phone service. But you drive a short ways or hike up to the top of the peak, and sometimes you can. At Barfoot Park, you can pick up KXCI, and then if you hike up to the ridge above Barfoot Park, you can get a couple bars on your cell phone. So yeah, you just have to be prepared not to be able to use your cell phone. Make sure people know where you're going. Somebody that's staying in Tucson, they know when you're going and when you're supposed to be coming back, and that's how to stay safe out there, making sure people know where you are.
That's an important point, because there are certainly many areas in these places we're talking about with no cell coverage. In fact, most, especially if you're in a canyon or something. But you can, hiking up to ridge tops and hilltops really makes, often you will get coverage up there when you don't otherwise. So it's definitely worth it if you really need to get connected.
Yeah, and Mike just said Verizon actually, does not have their maps are misleading on where their coverage is.
Yes.
That goes for
absolutely.
All the carriers.
Absolutely.
We'll look at the chat and see if we have any more.
Any questions about specific areas?
So somebody just asked, Cheryl asked, camping sites restrict open fires and limit cooking with propane. Generally not limiting cooking with propane just about anywhere, even under fire restrictions. I mentioned at the beginning of this that the forest and BLM lands are closed to open fires. So, but you can take your propane stove with you and cook dinner still. Yeah. And how we often did it back in the day was when we couldn't have a campfire, we'd take a candle with us and set it down on the ground, and then all sit around the candle and pretend it was a campfire. And it almost works the same.
Still have to be careful with candle light.
Yeah. And so there's an asking about guides. So there are some great guides. There's a Tucson Basin focused hiking guide by one of the guys who founded the Tucson Hiking Club. And then I think the Chiricahuas and the Huachucas both have hiking guides. So yeah, I would encourage you to visit. Summit Hut has many of those guides, as does the Tucson Audubon Nature Shop. Any special places that would be best for smaller kids without any four-wheel drives? I think
there's so many.
Yeah, there's you know, the stuff up on Mount Graham.
Yeah.
It's easy access. It's super flat on top. It's easy hiking around. There's great vistas looking out over the valleys that surround there, and plenty of both dispersed and developed campsites up there. The Huachucas, maybe base camping out of the lake there. They have a developed campground at Parker Canyon Lake, and
That's
doing
a good
day
area.
hiking up the canyons is a great spot. Sycamore Canyon, easy accessibility in the Pajaritos, the one coming out of Aravaca on Ruby Road, and then an easy hike down to where the creek is actually flowing and the kids can play in the water.
Yeah, you have to, the one thing to say about that is just, you know, some people are concerned about border activity more than others, not areas maybe slightly more activity than some.
True. So my advice earlier on the chat to somebody who asked that question is, in my 25 plus years, I've never had an issue with running into any migrants or drug smugglers. I've run into both. One time came across 2 young men crying on the side of the road because they were so lost. So I gave them food and water and told them to wait there. And the Border Patrol picked them up. But generally, if you see somebody coming, get out of their way is my advice. Always be totally aware of your surroundings. These people, they're on a mission, whether to get into the United States because they need a job or they're coming to reunite with their family, so they don't want any trouble. And any smugglers, they've got a job to do, and if they don't do it, they're going to be in trouble with the really bad people in Mexico or their bosses. So they don't want to mess with you either. They're going to try to get away from you as much as you want to get away from them. Yeah. I will say right now, there's not a lot of action on the border. Kind of the economic downturn that started in 2007 really impacted the amount of people that were crossing the border. And it was just starting to come back up with our economic recovery until the pandemic hit. And there's not much action happening down there right now, no matter what the president says.
Yep.
There's a question about any specific guides to waterways.
That is one thing we do not have for this area. Yeah, nobody has put together a comprehensive list. In fact, it's been asked of me if somebody had suggested doing a little gazetteer for each one of the mountain ranges that kind of lays out all the different, the animals, the plants, the hiking trails, the areas to visit, the camp spots, the springs, the creeks. Nobody has done that yet. You know, there's great field guides for reptiles and amphibians. There's great field guides for birds, for damselflies and dragonflies. There is no good plant guides. There's a bunch of different plant guides. And when I go, I take like 10 with me so I can actually identify some of these plants. I don't put them in my backpack, of course. But there's not the definitive guide for plants out there. And yeah, definitely no guide for waterways, unfortunately.
This is a great question. Does WMG ever take people backpacking and camping? We haven't, but that sounds fun. Not right now.
We just have to stay in our watershed.
Yeah.
So you know who does take people camping is Watershed Management Group, or Sky Island Alliance takes people out camping to do volunteer work. So take a look at Sky Alliance's website. They're not doing anything right now, but I know they've been doing tons of invasive species removals over in Aravaca, and they actually get a stay at the TNC guest house there with a little kitchen and a beautiful area to set your tent up right next to the creek. So I'll plug Sky Alliance. And that really is about the only group in the region that actually takes people out to do work.
Does Borderlands do some of that, maybe?
Not really.
No.
Yeah. Who is it? It's the Sierra Club has their inner city outings. And I just want to mention it because it's kind of cool what they do. They take inner city kids out camping to expose them to nature. So that's a great program of the Sierra Club.
So just for a little bit of clarity, since we do have some new folks in here, Trevor, could you talk about when what we normally would be doing with River Run Network members in terms of going out to do field work?
Yeah, so as many of you know, we have a lot of restoration sites out there. We did quite a few restoration workshops last year. that included planting, rock work. We did a couple river cleanups, and we love those things, and we love interacting with our volunteers. We're all jonesing to get back out there with you all. You know, we also have our co-op program where you learn how to install water harvesting practices at your own home in somebody else's backyard, while you're gaining credits to get a discount on us bringing a co-op volunteer workshop to your house to install water harvesting structures, whatever they may be, passive or active. So, you know, I don't know if we're going to have anything this year. I'm hoping in the fall that this thing we've kicked its butt, or we have herd immunity or whatever, but I really miss you all. I miss getting out in the field. We have resorted to having to hire crews to do some of our work for us. Of course, it's with the Arizona Conservation Corps, which hires young people and teaches them outdoor skills and leadership skills. So it's a great program. But my plan was to have a bunch of workshops this year, and it's just unfortunately not going to happen. But hang in there. We'll all be back soon, I hope.
Cheryl has a good question about planting events to help Mount Lemmon recover. I think it's maybe a little early, that nothing has been planned that I have heard of yet, but certainly hopefully somebody has some time and money to do work like that up there.
Well, we also, I think, are about to have a new contract with U.S. Forest Service, right? Trevor maybe knows about that. Forest Service to do One Rock Dam with them.
Yeah, so we're working with the Forest Service on erosion control practices in the Catalinas and Rincons. They have put together an environmental compliance document that covers our work across those two mountain ranges. So it's pretty exciting. I will mention on the plantings, Petey Muschietti on his show yesterday, Growing Native on KXCI, was talking about when they redid the Mount Lemmon Highway, he was contracted to grow out 20,000 plants to replant where they widened the roadway. And then the fire hit, so he had to repot everything into bigger pots. And the next year, all those plants went into revegetating the Summer Haven area. So it was pretty cool. Borderlands Restoration has a greenhouse down in Patagonia on the Native Seed Searches farm, and they grow for the Forest Service. They've been growing tons of walnuts because there's an indigenous squirrel in the Catalinas that was becoming rarer, and its main food source were walnuts. And so they've been growing and planting walnuts in the Catalinas now for the past 5 or 6 years. So I'm sure the Coronado National Forest and the Catalina Ranger District are planning right now how to get plants out on the landscape as soon as possible. There is the burned area emergency response team that the Forest Service puts together, and they come from all the different types of people who work for the Forest Service. And they're up on that mountain today. They've been up there for weeks behind the firefighters, assessing the damage that's been done, assessing how stable the soil is. They build erosion control. They seed. They seed with both native species, but they also seed with a fast-growing oat and barley that is an annual that gets roots into the ground really quickly and holds soil together. And then they're sterile. The second generation of this plant is, or that generation of the plant is sterile, so it can't continue to seed out and spread out. But these guys know what they're doing. Sky Alliance is working with them right now because they've got a bunch of spring sites in the Catalinas that they're concerned that erosion could take out these spring sites. So we'll be talking with the Forest Service, their bear team, and Sky Alliance, and just making sure that they're doing it right up there, and we don't have large debris flows coming down the mountain. Jonathan yesterday shared with us not a burn severity, but a potential for large flood debris flows coming down out of the mountains. And it actually looks like it's pretty good news. It looks like there's not The worst of the fire was at the very top of the mountain, and the steeper drainages didn't get burned as at high intensity. So I'm praying for good luck on debris flows. It's raining very gently out there. Hopefully it's putting the fire out. Hopefully it continues to rain gently over the next couple of weeks before we get the big giant monsoon chubasco coming down and causing a bunch of soil movement up in the mountains.
There almost certainly will be some of that, but hopefully it's not too bad. But I would expect some of that, certainly.
Well, that's the river's job. The river's job is to take the mountain to the sea.
The question about filters, it's been a while since I bought a filter, so maybe stuff has changed out there, but there are quite a few good filters for backpacking. Trying to remember which one I have, but there are quite a few different types. If I remember correctly, the ratio for, and Trevor, if you can remember, I think it was 5 drops of actual concentrated iodine that per quart that was the recommended, and you let it sit for a while. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, that sounds right.
And I think that's better and cheaper than using the little tablet kind of things, which are already pre-measured. So if you want to buy those, that's good too. But if you just get pure iodine, you can actually just use that. If you look up online the ratio, but I think it was 5 drops for a liter of water, and then you need to let it sit for a little while. I think I have a Pure Water filter is the brand I have, but I think it's at least 10 years old. So the world around water filters changes quickly. So I'm not sure what's happening out there right now.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of REI. I'm a member, but I want to plug the Summit Hut, locally owned, great people. I would go in and ask them about water filters. My water filter also is probably 15 years old. I'm probably due for a new one. And then also like Backpacker Magazine, backpacker.com, always has tons of product reviews on their website. So they probably recently reviewed water filters also. And that goes along with all that camping gear. It's a great source for reviews, headlamps, boots, tents, what have you. But again, Summit Hut, the folks who work in there are just a wealth of knowledge. They got all the maps, they got many of the guides, and they got all the equipment you could need, including iodine pills and of course the water filters.
I wanted to thank everyone for attending, for Trevor and Sky for staying a little bit extra to answer questions. These guys always have a lot to share. So hopefully in the future we can plan a little camp trip and sit around the campfire and share more stories. But lots of good information here. We will be sharing, we have recorded the session, so this will be posted on YouTube for sharing out if you know other people that'd be interested in what we shared here today. So again, thank you, River Run Network members. I hope you plan some fun staycations here over the next few months, and stay in touch.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.